Our opening game is going to be Kibler versus SilentStorm, and as I mentioned, we did record the deck building process. So let's just kick it off. Let's see what these players went with.
Yeah. And of course, this is 35 minutes that they get. We have to, I believe this is at 5x speed
Yeah,
because, well, you don't want to sit there
yeah.
forever while they're looking at it. But you can see right now, yeah, it looks like Kibler has decided to go with Warlock. But Silent Storm starting with Hunter, that was,
hmm
I was feeling like Hunter was like a very hard choice to make really good three decks with. What do you think?
Yeah, picking the class is a very big step because oh, Kibler went with Mage now.
Oh.
Um, picking the class is a really big step because when you're doing like the Challegnestone format, you kind of realize what's good maybe after you've tested the cards a little bit. But
hmm
with this format, because you have to play the same class 3 times, you don't really have that leeway. So that's why it's 35 minutes. You know, we want to give players
Yeah.
enough time to think about the classes that they want to consider, try a few things out, and then actually like start running through the cards. I think Hunter is a good class actually because the Hunter hero power, I believe, gains strength
Yeah.
as um, games are going to probably last longer because most of the aggressive decks won't be realized. Certainly not 3 times. You know,
hmm
even if your opponent is playing one really aggressive deck, fine, you might lose to that. But if they're playing 2 slow decks, playing a Hunter is going to give you a little bit of an edge because with the game drawn out as long as it can, you'll get much more hero powers in. So yeah, I think it's a very good strategy. I think you can play aggro in this format, and it seems like Soundstorm is going with that. You know, he's going with a lot of
hmm
1 drops, a lot of 2 drops. He's making Murlocs. While Kibler's taking the other approach. He's trying the varied type of specific mage deck. He's going with a spell aggro. I think we had a dragon mage in there.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about mage too much. I guess probably just because I don't play it that much. But
hmm
I'm wondering if anyone would even try using a warrior deck in this, because that's one that I threw out as a possibility pretty early on. It didn't. It felt like, what are you really doing here? What does this armor up do for you? Is flexible with like random ass cards in your deck. So I kind of bringing that into consideration. The Silent Storm deck types make a little bit more sense for me.
Yeah, Warrior is a class that kind of works around combos. People compared, like some of the players actually, compared this challenge to like Arena. It's kind of like Arena
hmm
because you have a lot of variation in your cards. You have to pick less than optimal cards in some cases, but it's not like Arena because you can actually set up the combos in the decks that you want. So Warrior actually is the worst in Arena, worst class out of all of them,
hmm
quite considerably so, I'd say.
Yeah.
Um, I'd say Warrior is not a very good class in this format either, but I think you can make it work. I think you can make them all work.
Hmm. Well, I'll be interested to see what these guys like overall the 8 players choose most often, because I wasn't surprised at all when I saw Kibler go straight into Warlock. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, he's thinking the same thing. But
Yeah.
uh, having both players not going with that, because yeah, I guess once he started making it, he looked, he's like, oh, wait a minute, you can't. There's not enough cards here for 2 zoos and a handlock. But
hmm
I like what you're saying about the mage though. It seems like, yeah, there's enough there, and I think that Silent Storm is kind of doing something similar here, right? Like maybe a more controlling and then 2 different types of aggro.
Yeah, you kind of have to go with that. You're forced into using all the class cards because the class cards are very fundamental to every deck.
Mm.
So I don't know. I guess you don't have to. You can just make 3 kind of balanced decks full of 1 and 2 drops
Mm.
and maybe steal some wins. But I feel like with a mix of control and just overall higher card quality and the decks overall is probably going to take a set over just a rush down build. But I don't
Mm.
know. We'll have to see how that turns
Well,
out.
yeah, it looks like he's making like a Hunter Murloc deck, which it sounds scary.
Well, he's got
But
Hungry Crabs in there. Hungry Crab is a pretty good card, I think, because some classes don't have the option to go into those archetypes, and I think other players will play Murloc decks as well.
yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all. Like if I was trying the Warlock, like I was saying, like you could probably make like a demonish zoo and a Murlocish zoo that used to be a very strong deck. So
hmm
that's definitely a cool idea from him.
hmm Um, I think in these final stages, you know, there's like 10 minutes left. Kibler
Hmm.
seems to have a pretty good idea where his decks are heading. I think he's doing a lot of checking to see if he doesn't make any mistakes. The mistakes are
Yeah.
pretty punishing. In fact, if a player has, let's say, a fireball in one deck and a fireball in another deck, both those fireballs are gone and replaced with salty dogs. So, you know, making a mistake like that can be pretty huge. I
Yeah.
mean, salty dog's not terrible, but I mean, let's say that fireball was a flame strike, then you're gonna lose the
Yeah.
games.
Yeah, certainly. You know, I'm starting to wonder. I'm like, huh, is there some way I could make like 3 pirate decks and abuse your rule because of salty? Wait, no, there's that doesn't quite work.
Yeah, fortunately, there's enough terrible cards in Hearthstone to make Challengestone possible.
Yeah, yeah, that is a fact.
Yeah.
But looks like this time really winding down. They're both doing like a really good job. I feel like if I was sitting there, you know, feet in the fire,
Hmm.
because like I had enough time to sit around and think about this, but you guys tell them and then bam, off to deck building,
Yeah.
and they have 35 minutes to do it. But I feel like I'd have like 2 decks done and like a bunch of overlapping cards and just be like, oh no.
Yeah. I feel like Kibler, both in this Challengestone and the last, just did an extremely good job building very solid decks.
Yeah, well, I remember in the last Challenge Stone, like right at the beginning during the deck building phase, we were looking at those decks and saying, okay, so Kibler and Trump look like they have the best decks, and they ended up in the finals against each other. So
Hmm.
it's actually it seems pretty easy to tell. And as they finish up their decks, of course, we can kind of take a look at that during their interviews and maybe take some guesses as to who's going to go ahead and win this
Yeah.
Challenge Stone as well.
There's a lot of fun cards in SilentStorm's decks too. I mean, because he's playing aggressive decks, just in general
Mm.
on his hunter builds, he's got to play cards like Stone Tusk Boar, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Because you need the quantity of 1 and 2 drops in those type of decks, and with this restriction, it's you have to compromise. Let's say.
Yeah, for sure you
Oh
do.
man,
Well, it
there we
looks
go.
like their time is up for that deck building.
Yep.
I'm pretty excited to see what they actually have to say about these decks and how tough this challenge has been.
Well, I did get a chance to talk to the players the moment after they finished building the decks. So why don't we go to that? All right, SilentStorm. Here we are, bringing in the Hunter. I'm pretty happy to see all the species of Hearthstone represented. Why did you go with Hunter? Was there much reasoning, much thought behind this, or just kind of impulse?
I just felt like Hunter was the strongest to play, having one of each card. Um, but like I don't play much arena, so I don't know if it's correct.
Hmm. Well, I thought when I was thinking about the challenge and the various classes, because we kind of have to test for one not to be too overpowered. Hunter was one that I kind of didn't really know how to place. In one end, you know, the games are going to last longer. As you saw building the deck, it's kind of hard to build a consistent deck, so most of it goes into the mid-range, and the slower the game is, the better the Hunter, the hero power. The better hero power the Hunter has, I mean. But at the same time, you know, when you make an aggressive dex and it's not aggressive enough, you know, is it really going to work? So, yeah, what are your fears? Do you think maybe one of the decks is going to struggle to pull a win in Conquest?
Um, when I was building, I was sure I was gonna build a slow deck and the fast Hunter deck.
Hmm.
So the one in the middle with Murlocs is what I fear I'm gonna lose a lot with. Um, Also, I think if I had more time, I could just adjust the decks better. Uh, there was also a mistake. I put shredders in 2 of my decks, I think. I think that was the only mistake.
Oh, you have piloted Shredder, and this is the weird one. This is the wild card. You have Hungry Crab, not in just one deck, but in 2 decks.
Oh, um,
That,
I guess that's not a bad thing.
yeah, that's okay, I guess.
Yeah, I was going too fast, so didn't
Mhm.
realize those.
How was your time management? Did you like spend the first bulk just thinking about it, and then maybe the end flipping cards around, correcting stuff? Like, just describe maybe the last moments in the deck building part.
I had some lag spikes flipping through my collection page, so it took a little longer to build the decks. The last minute, I was just putting new ideas into the decks. Adjusting the last few cards was the hardest. I think there are some more cards that need to be adjusted, but there wasn't enough time.
I think you got some pretty good ones, though. Cult Master, I'm very happy to see that. That is one of those cards that just carries a deck just unbelievably in some arena games. So I think you have a pretty decent setup. I think the main challenge is seeing if the concept is going to prove right. If the games are actually slowed down enough to where you can just roll people with your Hunter hero power and some early game damage. But I think you'll do pretty well. Do you fear any of the field? You're all going to have to go up against the Challengstorm champion Kibler to start.
Yeah, my first opponent, Kibler, is definitely a strong one because he won the last Challengestone. He definitely knows what he's doing. I'm expecting a strong lineup from him, and I don't know. I think I can win.
You think you can win? Well, let's see how it's going to go down. Just a second. So Kibler, mages, huh? What made you choose this this class? Did you spend much time thinking about it?
I didn't spend a ton of time thinking about like class-wise. Sort of my impressions of the challenge in general was that the decks are going to be, sort of less consistent, lower power level than the average deck, obviously, because you're playing only single copies of cards, which kind of felt like it would make decks similar to Arena in some ways, in that, you need to have, just, sort of more just independently powerful cards and things like that, and that you want a hero power that is able to be impactful in a wide variety of situations. I think the hero power, because of the challenge, actually kind of more important because the overall power level of the cards is going to be lower. And I think that Mage's hero power isn't the best. I mean, Warlock I think is the best hero power, but Mage has a hero power which is like less reliant on synergies, and Warlock can be kind of poor if you don't have the right tools to take advantage of it.
Yeah. Now you went with a dragon, a mid-range, and a spell aggro. Do you have any preference? Like, how did you distribute the cards? Because, Mage does have very powerful cards, but you probably very quickly notice that you run out of good cards when you're building these decks.
Yeah, I mean, because, just for any class, you have very few class cards to actually deal with. So I wanted to try to find a couple of decks that could take advantage of sort of the powerful class cards that Mage does have. And I went with the aggressive sort of spell-based deck to try and take advantage of cards like Mana Worm, Mad Scientist, obviously not a mage card, but it is a,
basically the best.
Basically a mage card.
Use mage.
And, some of the good secrets there. And then, find places to put, cards like Fireball, Flame Strike, and things like that. And, sort of the two like obvious directions were like aggressive mage deck, control mage deck, because there are tools, in the mage class cards to make both of them. And I think that those two are probably my stronger decks. The third one, I was trying to take advantage of some of the mech synergy cards that exist in Mage. Obviously, Blast Mage is a super powerful card, and just the mech synergy cards in general have some power. The power level of the synergies in general is going to be harder to manifest because the decks themselves are less consistent.
Right.
So that deck kind of was a mech deck, and kind of just like a good stuff deck, like just trying to find places to put powerful minions that I hadn't placed before.
Yeah, well, I think you succeeded with that pretty well. What do you think your chances are of reclaiming your title?
100%. No. I mean, I think that there's definitely a strong field in this tournament, and I don't feel as good about my decks as I did last time. I thought last time I was really happy with my decks, and I felt like I had a really good grasp of what was going on. This time, like I said, I think that my third deck feels like it's only okay. I like the other two, but we are playing Conquest this time, and it's possible that a weak link can sort of sink the ship. But I'm reasonably confident.
Now, with this type of format, with having to play the same class 3 times, you kind of face the bad class matchup much more like a wall kind of deal. So, are you afraid of other classes given your lineup?
I don't think so. I mean, it's possible that like priest could be tough.
That's how it is in arena, but
Yeah,
you know it is different.
priest was actually the other class that I was thinking of playing, because priest I think is just a strong class when the power level of things that are going on is relatively weak because the hero power is good in any kind of just minion versus minion combat, which is what games that aren't really synergy driven tend to boil down to. But I felt more confident playing mage with just I think the hero power is better in a lot of cases in mage. Like and I think the card pool in priest leans pretty heavily on specific cards. Like I think priest leans pretty heavily on cards like Northshire Clerk in order to actually have sufficient efficiency of card drawing and things like that. So but yeah, I don't know. I think that that's probably the class matchup I'm most afraid of, but I don't know that'll be a popular class. We'll see.
Now, just as a last question here, I'm really curious how you manage your time. I know in the first Challengestone you had very good time management. You had, compared to other players at least, a very easy time playing around with cards in the decks because your strategy was to play what you know. And I think that really was your strength. How did you manage your time this time around? Was it an easy task? Did you maybe explore other classes if you had some time left?
I mean, I didn't really have any time left. I was like thinking of changing cards literally when you were counting down like 20 seconds. Just because, I mean, one of the big challenges here was just making sure my decks were legal. Going back and forth and be like, okay, no, this is only this is because the other one, it's like, okay, I look at the card, I figure if the card is legal and I put it in or not. This one I have to recheck all my decks repeatedly. Oh, I didn't play that yet, right? So there's no easy interface on the collection screen to look at all the decks at once.
Right.
So I couldn't just easily cross-reference them. So that ended up consuming like a pretty significant amount of my time. And I really, was just trying to, find where to put the good cards in the different decks with pretty much all the time I had.
All right. Well, good stuff. Let's see if you can defend your title.
See what I can do.
All right. Well, some pretty cool interviews, some pretty cool decks for these guys. I can't wait to see that Murloc deck in action, Crit.
Yeah, a few punishes though. He doesn't have quite the clean deck he thought he would when he was making it. Kibler did a home run, no mistakes. But SilentStorm, what does he have to take out?
He has to take out Piloted Shredder, and I believe that is the second takeout. He has to take out Hungry Crab from 2 of the decks.
Okay.
The aggro and the Murloc, which kind of really sucks. That's definitely going to be a card that he wanted there. So Salty Dog, I mean, that swings for a lot of damage.
Salty Dog's okay. I think if you're winning with a bunch of small creatures, Salty Dog is pretty good because you can defend them with the small creatures.